So it looks like once again Prince Harry is in the headlines. This time more Harry than Meghan. Um, and it's for a statement he made on the First Amendment. Uh, so a bit of background here. Apparently he was speaking to an actor, Dak Shepherd, on a podcast. Um, yeah, he was speaking to actor Dak Shepherd, this is from Sky News, and producer Monica Padman on the Armchair Expert podcast. I think this is part of Fox News, I'm not sure. And basically, he said that he, I don't want to start going down the First Amendment route because that's a huge subject and one which I don't understand because I've only been here a short time. But you can find a loophole in anything. You can capitalize on or exploit what's not said rather than uphold what is said. And they call it bunkers. I've got so much to say about the First Amendment as I sort of understand it, but it is bunkers. Now, um, for a second, let me just play the devil's advocate for Harry. Just for a second. It is a little bit ironic that this amendment is to protect freedom of speech, and yet he's being very fiercely attacked for having his opinion. That's a little bit of a contradiction from his critics. You know, if the First Amendment is to protect freedom of speech, then Harry's expressing his freedom of speech. There's that aspect. However, on the other hand, the aesthetics of it, the optics of it, it does not look good when you have someone who's not an American coming in and criticizing an aspect of the American Constitution, which is extremely important. And when you consider that that person is a very prominent member of the British royal family, I think a lot of Americans will be thinking 1776. So, in terms of diplomacy, it's really a bad move by Harry. He might have just been expressing his opinion, but I think it was a bit reckless to say that. Um, I sort of know what he meant because, like, with the Second Amendment, that can be interpreted in various ways by the gun lobby and by those who are critical of the gun lobby. But you know, it's the optics of it. You have a member of the British royal family who's come with his wife to the United States because he wants to get away from the challenges he says he has in the UK. Now he's criticizing the country that's taking him in. Um, Apparently, I imagine this is the context of the fact US publications want to publish details of his life and his struggles, and he's taken issue with that. Here's the problem with Prince Harry, and with Meghan Markle to an extent, but Harry, in some ways, has less excuses because he's always been part of the royal family. He should know that as a public figure, there's always going to be interest in him. But here's the problem: these two are just sending out a message that is contradictory. We want to be left alone. We want privacy. Stop asking us difficult questions because it's putting pressure on our mental health. But please give us a platform to say what we want to say. Now, this is just a contradiction. I really think if Prince Harry wants to have the life that he's saying that he wants, he needs to just basically stop making public comments. He needs to tone it down. He can have his own opinions, like anyone can, but he is a public figure and he simply cannot say, allow me to make my opinions, but don't ask me questions, don't ask me difficult questions. Because it looks entitled, it looks spoiled, and what he's doing now is managing to polarize people on both sides. Because for a lot of Britons, we don't like the fact, I say we, I don't speak for everyone, but a lot of Britons feel that when they basically trashed the family in that interview, it was, and to an extent, this country. You know, when they said they cited the reason for leaving was in large part due to racism. You had left wing American commentators like Don Lemon lapping it up. So a lot of Britons felt quite resentful of that. They felt that Harry and Meghan had kind of vilified this country to the American audience, and we felt quite resentful about that because if you look at the footage of the royal wedding, Meghan was warmly welcomed. Charles brought her down the aisle. And what I find sad about this is I feel these two are turning one of the world's oldest institutions, the British royal family, into a sort of soap opera because it's all very well to them for them to go to Oprah and complain and say we've been treated this way and that way, and what's true and what's not true. But Prince Charles, Prince William, the Queen, certainly, they're not going to do some sort of sit down sensationalistic interview where they counter that. And then it just becomes a war of the interviews, which happened in 1995, 96 with the Diana and Charles interviews. And I think that was a mistake. This Martin Bashir thing that's come about, that whether or not they're going to re-release this panorama investigation into how Martin Bashir acquired the interview from Diana. Now, I was too young then to look at the optics of it, but was Diana doing a bit of what Harry is now doing, i.e., wanting to have an interview to help tell her side, but then complaining about press scrutiny? Maybe to an extent, but I don't think Diana's situation is comparable either, because Diana, there were contradictions in her life. She did need the press just as much as she loathed them. However, with Diana, I think it's a bit different because she was on her own and she, well, I suppose you could find similarities. I was going to say she stayed in the UK. She didn't in Paris, she went to France. So I suppose you could say, find some analogies, but I think Diana was sincere in a way that I don't want to say Harry. I don't trust Meghan. I don't think she's entirely sincere. I think Diana was. I think Diana was childlike in a way these two aren't. I think there's some differences, but I could see some similarities as well. Um, and I think there's differences between the Martin Bashir interview and the Oprah Winfrey interview in the sense that Diana was I think the format was different. I'm not sure that it's exactly the same thing because Oprah's style of journalism is very much talk show, whereas Martin Bashir was an investigative journalist. So it was a different format. Because the only reason I mention that is because a lot of people compare Meghan to Diana. Both outspoken women who, were quite active in humanitarian causes. I think Meghan is more political than Diana was, a lot more political, and with Harry is as well. I mean, would Diana have been into woke politics? Maybe. We'll never know. But she famously said, "I'm not a political figure," whereas Harry and Meghan are quite political in the sense of their promotion of woke politics and their statements on race. I'm not sure Diana would have done that. So that's the difference. But my feelings about them, it's just sad. A lot of people feel angry about Harry and Meghan. I don't. I feel sorry for them, not in terms of pity, like they're privileged people, they're wealthy, and they've got privileged lives. And I think the problems that they have, to some extent, are self-inflicted. So I don't feel sorry for them in that sense. But I feel sorry for them in the sense that they're so blind that they cannot see they're causing their own problems. So with Harry especially, I see a man who is lost. And in that sense, I've some sympathy with him. Because I think he's now estranged from his own family. He's in another country where he's now being, he's just shot himself in the foot. He really, really needs to. I think he should apologise for the First Amendment remark. Maybe say, well, I appreciate this is sacred to the American Constitution, and as an outsider, or rather as a non-American, I didn't mean to be disrespectful, and I respect it. Something like that. I think that they also really, really need to practice what they preach. If they really, really want privacy, they cannot continue making these public statements and putting themselves in the news because they do. And he said he wants to protect his child at the moment, Archie. Um, But what's going to happen when Archie is older? People are inevitably going to ask him, your parents were famous people, and they kept going to the press, doing these interviews, talking about the British royal family, how and then Archie will be dragged into it. So for people who want to protect their son, they're going about it in a strange way. They if I think this would be different if they say, look, we want a private life, please leave us alone. And they tried to do that and they didn't go for interviews and so on. And then the press hounded them. And I'd say, okay, well, the press are being jerks. They're being, they're doing that. But at this point, 6 out of 10 of the British public now believe they should completely lose their royal titles. And I'm starting to be sympathetic to that idea. Because I think the more that they come out with these sort of comments, the more that they try to put themselves in the news, the more damage they're doing to their family. And for people who talk about mental health, they're not showing a great deal of concern for the mental health implications of publicly smearing their family as racist, for example, knowing full well that they can't retort to that. I mean, when it comes to Diana, for example, let's not forget William also lost his mother, but he is being a far more responsible person. He's not making himself the story. He's just being. I like William and Kate. I think they will make a good king and queen consort. I don't hate Harry and Meghan, but I just think it's sad to see what's happening with this. It's so sad to see this turning into a soap opera because for most people, to see these millionaires complain about their life, it doesn't go down well. And of course, money in itself doesn't guarantee happiness. It doesn't make someone immune from depression, for example. That's true. And Harry was right to say that in the interview that just because he's rich doesn't mean he's not capable of being depressed. Of course he is. But the thing that people question is the way he's going about this. You cannot say, I want privacy, but then continue to put yourself in the news. I mean, why is he doing an interview with this actor? If he really wants to be a private person, then do it, Harry. Be private. If you have passions in life, you can pursue those without turning them into a news event, or at least not to this extent. Probably, to be fair, it would be difficult for Harry and Meghan to never ever get attention, even if they tried, because they are famous people. So the paparazzi being what they are, that's another thing I don't understand about this whole saga. They talk about press intrusion. Well, Californian law on the paparazzi is a lot more liberal than British law because the Americans do have an absurd way of looking at the way the paparazzi behave as free speech. Now, in that sense, it is a bit crazy. That is not free speech. That is actions. Um, but he would have known that when he went to California. He would have known how easy it is for the paparazzi to behave the way they do over there. We have them here as well, but it's a bit stricter. For example, after Diana died, newspapers were prohibited from taking photos that had the long lens, the one that the paparazzi used that had zoom in shots. Now, to be fair, they still take some pretty dubious photos. You'll see pictures in the Daily Mail and the Daily Star and other tabloids that are clearly from the paparazzi. Um, I do have a problem with that. And in this whole Harry and Meghan thing, I've never went out of my way to defend the British tabloids. Although I do think some of what they have said don't add up to the facts, but what Harry and Meghan have said. But the tabloids, I'm not going to go out of my way to defend them. I do think they can be sleazy. I do think that the way they go about things can be morally dubious. But the problem with Harry and Meghan is their contradictions. I would have a lot more sympathy with them if they said, look, we want to live as private individuals, and then the press kept hounding them and, taking pictures outside their house and so on. Apparently, they'd had a lot of breaches. Well, if that was happening, and I mean, in terms of the press attention, then I would say the press need to back off. They've said they want to be private individuals, so respect that. But the problem is the press will say, well, wait a second, they're doing these interviews, they are being public figures, so we're only doing our job and covering it, asking questions. And I do think there is a sense that Harry and Meghan just want comfortable questions. They just want to manage it their way. Well, they can't have it that way. They're not above criticism, and they can't take this attitude that we can have everything our own way. and then kind of gloss it over. Oh, we're doing it for our son. Well, maybe, but it's coming across like you're doing it for yourself. And if you're really doing it for your son, then consider the future questions that he's going to face. You know, your parents wanted privacy. They were famous people, but they kept seeking out this attention. So they can't have it both ways. I don't take any pleasure from this. I think it's genuinely sad. And Harry, I think, is going to end up a lonely man because some are even speculating that their marriage will not work out. I'm not sure about that. And I think it's quite mean spirited to hope that it doesn't work out, given that this man is basically, you know, uprooted himself from an ancient institution. He's went to another country. If in the worst case scenario they broke up, Harry will be a very lonely individual, and that would be a sad thing. Because I fundamentally don't think Harry is a bad man. I don't. I think fundamentally he does have some of his mother's human decency there, some of her humanitarianism. But I think he's lost, and I think that he. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens when this Diana statue is to be unveiled in what would have been her 60th birthday. I really, really think on that occasion, both sides need to work hard to patch things up. Because if nothing else, even if the press is still critical, at least if the family can patch things up, just from a human point of view, you know, that's important. And I think it's very difficult at the moment because the Windsors are understandably going to be resentful that Harry went and, basically smeared them in front of the world. I don't blame William and Charles for being resentful about that. I mean, if I have a brother, I do, and he was, it's hard to compare because, I'm a Joe average, but if I was the heir to the British throne and my younger brother went on to a famous and popular talk show host and said, "Oh, by the way, my family is racist," and I'm listening to that, I'd feel quite disgusted. So I don't know what Harry and Meghan expected the response to be. If they were doing that to, provoke a reaction from the royals, I don't know what it was. They might claim they had no choice. Rubbish. They did have a choice. They could have not done the interview. Apparently, Harry's regretted aspects of it since. I mean, this guy's in his late 30s. He's still a young guy. He's got the rest of his life ahead of him, and it's going to be dominated by the decisions he's making right now. And that's sad. It may well be that one day he comes back to the UK without his royal title and he could find some sort of life here. But that would be in the situation if things didn't work out with Duchess of Sussex. And I don't know, I just think it's genuinely quite sad to see what's happening, but I think they're creating a lot of the problems themselves. I really do. I mean, I went, I looked at that Oprah interview with an open mind. I thought, okay, well, maybe there will be some things to say here that do warrant questions. I do think one thing that needs to change in the British monarchy is some of the stuffiness. Some of the court procedures, for example, some of that does need to be discarded because it's just ridiculously stuffy and out of place in the 21st century. But here's the thing, I really do think that Charles will be a modern monarch compared to his mother. But what's Harry doing here? He knows that the Queen is in the twilight of her life. He knows that his father's going to take over, and it's like he's deliberately trying to put up this bad PR for the man. It's never pleasant to see a family being torn apart so publicly. And when it's the most prominent family, arguably, in the world, then it's all the more exacerbated. I think it's very sad to see what's happening. And I really, really hope that I hope that Harry and Meghan could just step back a bit and think, is there something that we are doing here that is causing these problems? Um, I have no ill wishes against them, but I I'm patriotic to my country, and I don't like to see the bad PR that they're causing. Because a lot of Americans will look at that. They won't say this is Harry as an individual. They might look at that and say, "Oh, that's British royal arrogance." well, probably they won't actually. They'll probably say it's just a Harry thing. But you know, of all the people to criticize the First Amendment, a member of the British royal family is not a good idea. In terms of history, it just doesn't look good. Okay, I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts.